Yeah, to Dr. Andrew Morris, a professor of medicine at the University of Toronto in the Division of Infectious Diseases, top 20 university in the world in most rankings, and also a sports fan, so he fits into the crew. One, Dr. Morris, thank you for your service. Two, thank you for your commitment to the greater good of us all. And three, thank you for joining us here on the show. How you doing today?
Arrow Mint.
Oh, comes in off the top rope with a mint, with a mint. I like chocolate mint ice cream. I feel like Arrow, you're getting ripped off by the bubbles. Is that just me?
No, that's a fair point. It's a fair point.
You just get less chocolate. I appreciate the conversation, the adding to the conversation. The one that I need to ask you though is the one that all of us are asking right now in the sports world. And we were talking about it a couple of weeks ago when the spikes in the numbers that we were seeing in the States started to hit. Are they going to cost us a restart of team sports? We've seen some crazy things in the MLS over the last couple of days. In your opinion, how many of these restarts across North America team sports are in some sort of trouble?
Well, let's start with Major League Baseball. Major League Baseball, I'm going to be shocked if they're able to fully restart. I can't see that as being a workable plan. So I'd be really well. It's the travel, and it's you've got 8, 9 teams. If you put together teams in Florida, Texas, Arizona, California, right, all really hard hit centers, and you're going to have athletes there. I just can't imagine teams being allowed to travel from there to states or provinces where they're saying we need people to be quarantined and we're trying to keep our disease under control. So it doesn't only have to be like Ontario, but just, New York State, for example, right? You got the Rays going and visit the Yankees. I'm sure Governor Cuomo wouldn't be too keen on that with their huge entourage. So I'm really skeptical that baseball is going to be able to pull it off. I think that's the league that's most at jeopardy with all this.
Is there a league that you think can pull this off, Doc?
Well, the NBA has to be really lucky, right? So their plan is actually pretty ironclad in many ways because they are really creating a full bubble and they're truly quarantining people. They're doing things in advance. They're trying to keep their athletes as happy as possible inside the bubble. I think the biggest threat to them is are the athletes actually going to be able to, and the rest of the staff be able to stay within the bubble for upwards of 2 months. And I think that's really I've stayed in Orlando for about 5 days, and that was the max that I could tolerate it. But to expect these pro athletes who have pretty interesting and creative lifestyles, some of them, to then be holed up and be able and doing the same thing day in and day out, other than training and playing ball. If they can do it, it's a good plan. The other thing I think that puts them really at jeopardy, and you may see athletes pulling out, is what's happening with Florida hospitals, right? And so, like, if you're an athlete and you get injured and you're, let's say, on, I don't know, maybe you need surgery or worse, and in their protocol, you need to go to the nearest hospital. And, Orlando's pretty booming with COVID right now, and their hospitals all over Florida are starting to fill up. And, I think I saw today that, almost, I think it was 21 ICUs are filled to capacity, and another large percentage of ICUs are less than 10% room before they're filled at capacity. And, that's when trouble occurs, when these hospitals get overwhelmed. And so if you're an athlete and you say, okay, you're going to be stuck in Orlando, and by the way, if you get injured, you're going to be in one of these overrun hospitals, I don't think I'd be that keen to do that. So I think that's the other really, really big threat. And we're only seeing the beginning of it now. But I think if we look ahead 3-4 weeks, those hospitals in Florida are going to be really jam-packed. And that's not just the NBA, that's the WNBA, that's soccer. So, I think probably wisdom, hindsight is 2020, but, picking a state with a COVID denialist as a governor probably wasn't a good plan on the NBA's half. Otherwise, it was pretty ironclad.
Dr. Andrew Morris, professor of medicine at University of Toronto, as well as a consultant in infectious diseases and general internal medicine at Sinai Health System, joining us here. Sinai Health System joining us here on Tim and Sid. I feel like you just answered this, but I think it's worth asking again. Like the states, like I almost think they're at this stage 5 of grief, and it's just acceptance. And I know that there are those across the world that have accused the U.S. of just giving up. Let's be honest, despite the folks at the forefront down south, like a governor who was just denying it and saying things like COVID would go away, there are a lot of very smart people in the United States of America. Is the idea that they can handle the number of cases and keep mortality rates down not sustainable?
I think it's pretty unsustainable. Certainly over the past couple of months, how everyone in healthcare is dealing with patients has changed. We now are pretty certain about some treatments that work, which we weren't certain of early on. So many of us were really just managing patients very conservatively without any specific therapies. And there wasn't really experience of handling some of the more challenging cases where now there's a lot of experience and people have shared those experiences internationally. So that does make a difference. But, at the end of the day, if you have a disease that hits enough people, you are going to have not only the deaths, but you're going to have people who are really very, very sick. Even if they aren't dying, they're going to be very sick, hospitalized for a long period of time, debilitated afterwards. And, you can't cheat those numbers after a while. So when you have millions of people infected, you are going to see, morbidity and mortality extend. And so I don't think they are not going to be able to continue to see those very and somewhat downward trending deaths as they have in the last while. It is going to start to uptick probably this week or next.
Doc, the CFL is still trying to make this a go. They want to bring Americans up from all over the United States. Do you foresee a scenario in which you could have athletes come in and be out and about without doing the quarantine?
I do, but I think you would have to do it. We should be doing it the same way we've been handling anyone else who comes to Canada for work or other essential purposes. I'm going to consider the athletes that would be coming to the CFL, they're coming for work purposes. That's how I see it.
Of course.
And when people come to Canada for work purposes, what they're expected to self-quarantine for 14 days. And if they're totally fine and asymptomatic for those 14 days, they can then become like the rest of the population. And so I don't see why it would be any different for an athlete. I do think that the leagues, whether it's the CFL or any other league, have to almost certainly do additional precautions because, football is a kind of a close contact sport. So you do need to take additional precautions and things like regular testing because athletes may, acquire COVID infection in their day-to-day life once they've, landed and started mingling in Canada. But I wouldn't think that the risk would be any different than any other citizen who's being reasonably careful. And I think if you're having them regularly tested, that kind of precaution would be more reassuring for sure.
As a human being and a guy who has some base knowledge, does it make you nervous, the idea of a hub in the NHL potentially probably being Toronto and the presence of a Major League Baseball team in the city that you call home? Does that make you nervous?
The baseball thing worries me, and it worries me because of how it's being considered and rolled out. I don't have a problem with the the Jays having training camp here. I do have a huge problem with the proposed plan of, other players coming and going from the U.S. and into Toronto. I definitely have a problem with that. For the NHL, from everything that I know, it's a pretty good plan. The one thing that I'm really not happy about is the concept that players are going to come in and teams are going to sort of bubble quarantine. So they're going to, as a group, quarantine for 14 days or something like that. I haven't seen the official number, but it's something like that. And I'm really not a big fan. There are many reasons why when you want people to quarantine, you keep them on their own rather than in groups, because otherwise you could have one person pass it to another. And on top of that, we've got other support staff and hotel staff and everyone else mingling in. I think if you had NHL players and team staff and personnel come to Toronto or Edmonton, and they all, quarantined individually for 14 days, it's, in my mind, it's the same rules go as for the CFL, which is that is a workable solution. And if they're going to do testing as they say they're going to do testing, then to me that's a very workable plan. And no, I'm not worried about that at all.
That's the lesson that should be learned from the MLS. I mean, when you have FC Dallas with 10 guys testing positive, including one coach, and now you see the same thing from Nashville, that's the lesson learned. And to me, it's always been about learning lessons from the rest of the world before you do these things. And I hope the NHL does the exact same thing.
I hope so. I really do. And I hope that the government, in allowing this, really pushes the NHL to do it properly. And even if it delays the start by a week, well, you know what? Make it delay the start by a week, but at least do it properly and reassure everyone and, ensure everyone's safety. And this is for athlete safety too. It's not just for the public safety. It's for the athlete safety as well.
Agreed. Before we let you go, since you came in swinging, I'm going to let you go swinging. I know you're a basketball coach, and you were tweeting about our friends at the CEBL who are using the ELAM ending, which is 9 points added to the lead under 4 minutes left in the fourth quarter, target score, just like the NBA All-Star game. Do you like it?
Love it. Absolutely love it. It adds excitement. That's what sports should always be about. And, it takes away the concept of teams just holding on to a lead right near the end. I think the CEBL has many good things about it that make it really enticing, and hopefully it'll be fun to watch. I think CBC is going to be carrying it. I'm looking forward to watching it.
Yeah, they will be. We appreciate you coming by and giving us informed knowledge. We always appreciate that here on this show. Thanks for doing this, and maybe we can talk down the road and talk a little basketball.
Perfect.
Thanks. Be well.
Okay, bye now.
There is Dr. Andrew Morris, professor of medicine, Division of Infectious Diseases at the University of Toronto. I say it like that because I have no idea what it actually means, just that he knows a lot about what we're talking about.
And he likes Aero bars with mint in them on this National Chocolate Day.